The story of Peter Gabriel. All about the album. Peter Gabriel, aka Peter Gabriel 2, or Scratch.
Personnel, musicians.
Peter Gabriel, lead and backing vocals, Hammond organ, piano, synthesizer. Robert Fripp, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, Freertronics. Tony Levin, bass guitar, Chapman stick, string bass, recorder arrangements, backing vocals. Roy Bittan, keyboards. Larry Fast, synthesizer and treatments. Jerry Marotta, drums, backing vocals. Sid McGuinness, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, steel guitar, mandolin, backing vocals. Bait, Todd Cochran, keyboards. Tim Capello, saxophone. George Marge, recorder.
Recorded at Relight Studios Hilverenbeek, the Netherlands, from November 1977 to February 1978. Producer, Robert Fripp. Release date, June 2, 1978. Chart placings, UK 10, US 45. Label, Charisma, UK. Atlantic, US.
The artwork for the second album was done again with Hypnosis, but with Peter Christopherson, who later went on to be a key part of the band called Throbbing Gristle. We did it in New York, and again it was cold and snowy. Storm had the idea of the nails tearing away at the paper of the image. I think it is something that he used on a theater piece that he done with his friends Lumiere and Son, but it was something that I enjoyed a lot. Design company Hypnosis had many obsessive themes in their work. One recurring theme was the 2D 3D concept, i.e. suggesting a 3D component to an essentially 2D event. Here, Peter is thrusting his hands out of the picture and back onto the photo surface, scratching it into strips. In reality, Hypnosis simply glued strips of torn paper onto the original monotone image and used Tipex to tart up the joins. I remember thinking when we were doing some photos around then, I always felt rather stiff and stilted in front of the camera, and still do today, and one of the ways to make the photos more interesting was to try and get some real people doing real things around it. So, we went down to the tube station, and I would sit sometimes on the bit between the escalators, or on buses, or I'd lie down in the road, and you'd just get pictures of faces reacting to whatever I was doing. It took a while for me to go from shy persona to, sort of, exhibitionist persona. Once I was there, I was quite happy, and I think we got some good pictures as a result, because they weren't just stiff, staged portraits in the studio, but something with a bit of real life thrown in.
When released, fans discovered an album cover that looked markedly similar to the one that had gone before. For a start, it appeared to bear the same title, or rather, no title. The typography was the same, as was the positioning, top left of the album. The image, in stark monochrome, was of Gabriel clawing away the picture, leading to the album's alternative moniker Scratch, and, like Carr, was the work of legendary graphic designer Storm Thorgerson's company Hypnosis. They were responsible for widely acknowledged classic album covers of the era, including Genesis' The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, A Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering, and of course the iconic Prism for Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. At the time, Gabriel had wanted something that resembled a magazine house style that fans would recognize simply from the masthead, only the image would change. He carried this idea through his first 4 albums.
Gabriel briefly considered working again with the producer of his first album, Bob Ezrin, but ultimately decided against it. Gabriel instead selected Robert Fripp. Compared to Ezrin, who was more insistent on dictating the arrangements, Fripp favored a more spontaneous work process that allowed Gabriel to contribute his own musical ideas. Gabriel credited Fripp with creating a studio environment that was conducive to creativity. Robert's approach to the process of recording was very good. He likes situations to happen rather than make them happen. On the first album I wasn't confident of my own ability in arrangement, whereas on the last one I was a lot more confident and had definite ideas. Fripp utilized his Frippertronics technique on the track Exposure, which he and Gabriel co-wrote. He later recorded a version of the song as the title track of his 1979 solo album Exposure. Fripp also pitch-shifted Gabriel's vocals with an eventide harmonizer, which created a slightly off-key vocal effect according to Stephen W. Taylor, who served as an engineer for the album. Stephen Short was originally tasked with mixing the album at Trident Studios after previously serving as a tape op at the facility. Taylor recalled that Short was a relatively recent hire at Trident Studios and observed that he encountered difficulties in managing disagreements between Fripp and Gabriel over the album's production. The remainder of the album was mixed by Taylor, who described the album as very dry-sounding. He partially attributed this to Fripp's preference to minimize the use of reverb. He had a concept called secret reverb, which meant if you could hear it, then it was too loud. During the assembly of the album package, Fripp wanted to include the phrase produced by Robert Fripp for Peter Gabriel in the liner notes to reflect his belief that he abdicated too much creative control to Gabriel. Gabriel said that Fripp suggested this credit because some of the style of the sound was not altogether what he wanted. He didn't want people to think that was exactly how he would have interpreted the music. In a 1980 interview with Smash Hits, Gabriel stated that he failed to attain the results he desired on his second solo release in part because of his creative differences with Fripp. Gabriel believed that Fripp lacked an understanding on how to effectively record synthesizers and said that the two spent too much time on theoretical arguments. He also expressed his opinion that On the Air and White Shadow were the only songs on the album that received sufficient attention in the recording studio. Larry Fast, who played synthesizers on the album, thought that Fripp's production choices did not adversely impact his contributions and felt that the drier and more intimate arrangements dictated the sonic colors and textures that he worked with.
You can't keep a good man down, and with the release of his eponymous album proving to be a success, it peaked at a very respectable 45 on the US Billboard chart, and following a tour whose set on the whole included material from this one album, encores would often be back in NYC, the sole Genesis number in the set, performed in Rail's leather jacket. It was now time to focus on that difficult second album. According to Gabriel, the album was more of a reaction to the first, but I don't think had enough time to evolve properly. If the previous year had been the year of punk, by 1978, all that had changed. The punk explosion had burned brightly but briefly, and from its ashes had risen the new wave, whose artists, unlike the have-a-go heroes of punk's bash it and bash it loud ethos, could actually play their instruments and be relied upon to write a decent song. If you don't believe me, just listen to Ever Fallen in Love with Someone You Should Be by Mancunian band, the Buzzcocks, or any XTC's first flush of singles. The music was freeze and urgent and was very much what Gabriel wanted for his new album. Although the previous album had done well, Gabriel was unhappy with what he felt was Ezrin's overproduced sound and so turned to ex-King Crimson guitarist, Robert Fripp, promoting him to the producer's chair, for what would become another eponymous song collection. This time the album would chime with the times in a way the first album had no done. It also had the luxury of not having to prove anything away from the band he'd left 3 years earlier, and so, perhaps for the first time, we get to see the musical path Gabriel had set upon. Fripp's productions cut back on the electronically induced spaciousness of Ezrin, and instead opted for the close, tight, dry, realistic, live-type sound, a technique Fripp referred to as audio verite. Among the musicians Gabriel used on this album, many were returning. Roy Bittan, originally wanted for the first album but unavailable due to commitment with Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band, joined on keyboards. Jerry Marotta replaced Alan Schwartzberg on drums, and Sid McGuinness, fresh from sessions with Barry Manilow and Leonard Cohen, took Steve Hunter's place on guitar alongside Fripp. Starch fared less well in the charts than its predecessor and remains an album that the majority of Gabriel fans less affection for. But why? Let's scratch the surface and have a look.
Song number 1. On the Air. Gabriel left the concept album behind him with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, or had he? The opening track on his Esco Indie album seems to suggest otherwise. Late in the song, he declares, "I want everybody to know that Mozo is here." Mozo, a derivation of the biblical Moses, was set to become a character story that, in an ambitious concept, would sporadically populate the albums to come, as opposed to being restricted to one album, like Rail in The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Ultimately, it was an unrealized project, but like all good messianic stories, his arrival was set in place. On a journey across the sea, see the previous chapter. We first encounter Mozo here in On the Air. Similar to Rail, he is living outside of society in the detritus that the rest of the world has thrown away and disregarded. Built in the belly of junk by the river, my cabin stands, made from the trash I dug off the heap with my own bare bands. Every night I'm back at the shack. I'm sure no one is there. I'm putting the aerial up so I can go out on the air. The inspiration for the character can be traced back to Gabriel's childhood. As he explains, "I remember in Horsell Common near Chobham, there was this beaten-up old caravan with newspapers in the windows. I used to think there was a witch inside there, and I think it probably fueled this setting for Mozo." So here is Mozo, a nobody wanting to be a somebody. All he needs is a TV show, that and a radio. In On the Air, he finds a way to break out of a fantasy world of his own creation and begin to connect with others through shortwave radio. At the time of fascination of Gabriel's as a character, we shall meet Mozo again. On the Air is an abrasive and bolshy album start, with Gabriel employing a strained vocal approach. It's an uncomfortable listen at times, but marks free PPS singular production style. The track is definitely in keeping with the musical times and has a far colder sound than Car, less than a year earlier.
DIY, do it yourself. One might be excused for hearing a similarity between this and Salisbury Hill. There is a shared, mostly acoustic arrangement, as if trying to capture lightning in a bottle and achieve a hit single ahead of the album, but the attempt fell flat. This lacks the charm of Salisbury Hill. The message is a straightforward one: take responsibility for and control of your life, not allowing those in power to dictate and determine your life, but rather, take more control in your own affairs. As Gabriel said in an interview with Spencer Bright for his authorized biography, 1988, rather than just change your attitude, change what do. I believe in small groups of people having a lot more control over themselves than they do at the present. In the UK at the time, there was a surge in popularity of self-sufficiency, so DIY, do it yourself, was a familiar acronym and ethos. Didn't help the chart success of the single, however, which in a further marketing twist, Charisma Ray released, dropping the original B-side, Perspective, in favor of two tracks, Mother of Violence, and Me and My Teddy Bear. But the Ray release didn't fare much better. This may have had something to do with the vocals, which Gabriel felt were not light enough. It certainly kept the punters away.
She's the mother of violence, making me tense to watch the way she breathed. Yeah, she's the
The song number 3, Mother of Violence. The chirping crickets, recorded by John Timms, that open this song, help set the tone of naturalism. A complicated song, this ain't. The soft acoustic and slide guitars wrap their arms around the lyrics, and the refrain piano carries us along. This diverts from the fact that the song itself isn't as carefree as the music would have us believe. It's a gentle little ditty that comes as a relief after the previous two acerbic numbers. It was originally written by Peter and his wife Jill as a children's Christmas carol for village church, but he liked the melody enough to use it on the album. Although, when coming to record it, Gabriel altered the lyrics of Innocence to convey a sense of fear and foreboding about the world, aided by the replacement of the cricket chirp at the 2:49 mark, with a discordant buzzing.
'Cause fear, she's the mother of violence. Don't make any sense. By the one way out, strange voice shout, don't let that good man out.
A Wonderful Day in a One-Way World is a song that can be interpreted in a few ways, often related to themes of societal pressures and conformity. One interpretation suggests the song is about society and the feeling of being a dead fish that must flow with the current, while another interpretation suggests it's about depression. The lyrics themselves are open to interpretation, but the overall feeling is one of resignation and a sense of being trapped in a system. The song's title itself hints at a world where things are controlled, where there's no choice but to go in one direction. The lyrics can be seen as a commentary on the constraints of society and the pressure to conform. The lyrics evoke a sense of melancholy and despair, with a phrase like dead fish suggesting a feeling of being stuck and unable to break free from a negative mindset. As with many of Gabriel's songs, A Wonderful Day in a One-Way World is not explicitly stating a specific meaning. The beauty lies in its ambiguity, allowing listeners to project their own experiences and emotions onto the lyrics. While the song doesn't have a single definitive meaning, the common interpretations point towards a feeling of being trapped, pressured to conform, and perhaps even experiencing a state of depression or resignation. The song's title and lyrics leave room for individual interpretation, allowing listeners to find their own meaning within the context of Gabriel's artistic style. White Shadow shows Gabriel at the peak of his game. Built around an alluring chord progression and making fantastic use of Larry Fast's swirling synths, the song is an inscrutable pop masterpiece that builds and builds until it closes with a mind-blowing Robert Fripp guitar solo that winds itself around your brain and refuses to let go. Gabriel uses elements of prog here without losing a strong pop sensibility, and that's really the genius of his first few solo records. And remember how on the original vinyl, the song lasted forever. The closing notes, a torrent of spiraling synths, continued into the run-off groove, and the only way to end the song was to lift up the needle. Freaking brilliant. Robert Fripp's guitar solo at the end rounds it off like the finale of an Arthur's disaster movie. Some will perish, some will survive. I was totally into disaster movies, right until I saw 2012, that was the one that cured me. But I don't believe I'll ever be cured from this song.
Song number 6, Indigo. The total antithesis of the Dylan Thomas line, rage, rage against the dying of the light. This is a song about approaching death that actually does go gently into this good night. It's a calm acceptance of the inevitable passing away of life. In the eye of the storm, I'm going away. The song owes much to Paul Robeson's O.L. Man River, which not only deals with the same subject matter but which Gabriel played a lot in the studio during the album's recording. As he admits, I had the mood of Old Man River in my head at the time. Interestingly, on the color spectrum, indigo sits between violet and blue. At the moment of death or in its approaching, the skin often takes on a blotchy blue appearance, so that when he softly sings beyond the indigo, where the chilly winds blow. My time is running low. Going to cross the dark, dark river, he is foreseeing that final moment. One might expect that on an album as visceral and raw as this one, that such subject matter when faced with the eternal abyss would veer towards Thomas's sentiments. But here, Gabriel puts a positive spin on the event, with, I've got nothing to fear from the showdown, and that when it ends, again I'll see my friends. The song began life as an instrumental called A Song Without Words, performed by Gabriel on his 1977 tour.
In this rather evocative song, Peter Gabriel sings from the perspective of a man on his deathbed. He's comforted by his child, who makes him feel warm in the eye of the storm as he nears the end. Early in the song, the man talks about how his body is breaking down, making almost jovial references to how his model is out of date and he's full of spare parts. As the song goes on, he gets more serene and spiritual, with talk of crossing the dark, dark river. At the end of the song, we hear him drift off. Explaining what motivated him to write this song, Gabriel said, I had the mood of Old Man River in my head at the time. This evolved out of an instrumental Gabriel performed on his 1977 tour that he called A Song Without Words. Indigo is a deep blue color that in the song represents the transition to total darkness, meaning death. The most famous use of the color in a song title is Duke Ellington's Mood Indigo. Peter Gabriel used a lot synthesizers in his solo work. He left Genesis in 1975, but on Indigo, he kept it organic. The song features a recorder, which was played by George Marge and arranged by Gabriel's bass player, Tony Levin. This is part of Gabriel's second solo album, which was produced by Robert Fripp of King Crimson. Musically, the album succeeded, but it didn't have any hits, which Gabriel's record company didn't appreciate. His next album was produced by Steve Lillywhite and fared far better commercially.
This time I'm going away beyond the indigo, where the chilly winds will blow. My time is running low and gonna cross the dark, dark river. Gonna see my good life giver. Better cover my yellow liver. Alright, I'm giving up the fight. I didn't know when I'd be a stranger again.
Join the Professionals was a UK Forces slogan in the late 1970s and is used here in a song about virility, proving oneself against an ex-lover and what she might expose of their relationship. What did you mean when you opened your mouth and left all our secrets out? You told him what I was about. My cover was completely blown. But over hero does something to prove his manhood, and joins the army after. Watching the war film, I got a few ideas of my own. Because after the film had ended, the call for recruits was shown. It's the classic story of the weakling who suffers at the hands of a bully, then work to improve his physique and wreak revenge. I bet the two of you still laugh at me for being as timid as a lamb. that may be still the way I look. It's no longer what I'm. In the 1950s, this idea of bodily self-improvement was exemplified by former bodybuilder Charles Atlas, whose adverts always portrayed skinny kids getting sand kicked in their faces by a laughing bully. It's an empowering song, Roy Bittan's familiar keyboards kicking it off nicely. In keeping with the tone of the album, Gabriel delivered it in his strained, attitudinal vocal style, which with the catchy "I'm joining the professionals" refrain would go down well on the tour that followed.
The song explores the connection between humans and animals. The lyrics depict the magic and wonder of the animal kingdom, highlighting the unique qualities and behaviors of different species. Through vivid descriptions, Gabriel invites listeners to appreciate the beauty and power of nature, reminding us of our shared existence with these creatures. The song also conveys a deeper message about the importance of environmental consciousness and respect for all living beings. Animal magic serves as a tribute to the natural world and a call to protect and preserve it for future generations.
Song number 8. Exposure. If any one track from Gabriel's early solo work truly points the direction in which he was heading, Exposure. His fascination with modern technology, not least shortwave radio, which had already informed the songs Here Comes the Flood and On the Air, finds a willing bedfellow in producer Robert Fripp, especially relevant to his delayed tape looping technique known as Frippertronics. Fripp used this technique when creating multi-layered recordings. And the effect here is hypnotic. Frippertronics, a term coined by Fripp's poet girlfriend, Joanna Walton, involved running tape around the reels of 2 tape machines. The lyric is spare and mantra-like, with "space is what I need, it's what I feed on" being the only proper line other than the repeated title. It's like a trip into the sonic world, helped along by Tony Levin's memorable bass line. The tune and vocals bring to mind John Lennon's I Don't Want to Be a Soldier Mama from his 1971 Imagine album. Robert Fripp would re-recorded Exposure for his own solo debut a year later.
This musical journey from Peter Gabriel's second album was heavily influenced by his producer, Robert Fripp, who also played guitar on the track. Fripp is known for his work with King Crimson, which, like Gabriel's former band, Genesis, was a leading light in British progressive rock. Gabriel moved in a more pop direction with his first solo album produced by Bob Ezrin and had a hit with Salisbury Hill. His label, Atlantic Records, wanted more like it, but Gabriel insisted on Fripp, who helped him deliver a very innovative album that was a commercial failure. His next album was made with the hitmaker Steve Lillywhite. The lyric mostly consists of Gabriel droning the word exposure over and over. It could refer to the media invading his privacy, but Gabriel also envisioned it as part of his Mozo story, which he thought could turn into a stage production. Mozo shows up on the album's first track, On the Air. Sonically, there's a lot going on in this song, including a recorder and drums played by Jerry Marotta, that were double-tracked and range across the stereo spectrum. Robert Fripp named his first solo album, released in 1979, Exposure.
Song number 9. Flotsam and Jetsam. In maritime terminology, flotsam is cargo ship goods that, in the event of a shipwreck, float to the surface, and jetsam refers to any cargo intentionally jettisoned. Here Gabriel is once again using water metaphors in his work, and it won't be the last time. In the lyric, the flotsam and jetsam refer to aspects of a doomed relationship that has metaphorically hit the rocks.
Peter Gabriel's flotsam and jetsam uses the imagery of a shipwreck to metaphorically portray a relationship, specifically one that is being torn apart. The song's rhythm and melody evolve, further emphasizing the volatile nature of this love. The terms flotsam and jetsam themselves refer to debris from a shipwreck, with flotsam being what washes ashore, and jetsam being what is deliberately thrown overboard to lighten a ship. Here's a more detailed look. Flotsam represents the wreckage or debris that remains afloat after a ship sinks, often drifting aimlessly. Jetsam refers to goods that are deliberately thrown overboard from a sinking ship to save it from drowning. In the context of the song, flotsam and jetsam can be interpreted as a couple struggling to stay afloat. The ship represents their relationship, and the storm symbolizes the difficulties they face. One or both partners feeling like they are losing control. The aimless drifting of flotsam and the desperation of throwing jetsam overboard can represent this feeling of being adrift and losing hope in the relationship. The relationship as a fragile and unstable construct. The imagery of a ship being wrecked suggests that the relationship is crumbling and may soon be broken.
Song number 10. Perspective. The fragility of the previous song is trashed with this one. As driving a number as any on the album. It's a full-blown rock track, with Timmy Capello's insistent saxophone aiding nicely, inhabiting the same space as Bruce Springsteen did at the time, helped by the presence of regular E Street Band pianist, Roy Bittan. It's unlike any Gabriel recording either before or since, but if it has a place on any Gabriel record, it's this one.
In Peter Gabriel's song Perspective, the core meaning revolves around the idea of understanding and perspective, often interpreted in a spiritual and philosophical context. The song explores the nature of reality, how we perceive it, and the limitations of our own individual viewpoints. Elaboration. Perspective touches on universal themes of time, space, and our place in the world. It suggests that our understanding of reality is shaped by our own individual experiences and perspectives. The song has been interpreted in a spiritual context, with some suggesting that Gaia refers to the earth itself, changing the meaning of the song to one about our relationship with nature. The lyrics highlight how our individual perspectives can be limited, suggesting that we may not be seeing the whole picture or understanding the true nature of things. The song conveys a sense of longing for a deeper understanding and a broader perspective, reflecting a desire to move beyond our own limited viewpoints. Perspective encourages introspection and a willingness to question our assumptions, suggesting that personal growth and a deeper understanding can be achieved by shifting our perspectives. Peter Gabriel's song Home Sweet Home explores the complexities of finding a sense of belonging and stability. It's not about a literal physical home, but rather about the feeling of comfort and security one experiences in a love relationship, particularly a deep and reciprocal one. The song Home Sweet Home delves into the psychological and emotional aspects of belonging. It's about finding a place where one feels understood, loved, and accepted, even if that home isn't a physical residence. The lyrics suggest that a strong, reciprocal love can provide a sense of grounding and stability, acting as a home in the face of life's uncertainties. The song's emotional intensity is conveyed through the use of contrasting vocal styles, moving from a conversational tone to a more passionate and expressive one. The song was inspired by Gabriel's youth and the Motown sound, with elements of Skrillex electronic music. The song explores the themes of love, belonging, and the search for a place where one can truly be themselves. On this track, Gabriel wanted to explore the motives of suicide. What frightens you is that you can't understand what drives people to do it. Considering it's an album of sound and fury and an unabashed sense of creative freedom, the closing track, a somewhat traditional story ballad, is a strangely muted affair. There is yet another doomed relationship, but instead of employing metaphor, Gabriel tells it like it is. Bill and Josephine marry and buy a flat, calling it home sweet home. But the isolation leads Josephine to jump out of the 11th story window with their son, Sam. Bill receives insurance money for the tragedy, but feeling it is horrible irony. He wins big, and instead of the squalid tower block flat, is able to afford their dream home. Bought myself a country house with an antique carved oak door, where he resides with nothing but his memories. Just a place to lay our head. Think of all those things we said about in our home sweet home. Sid McGuinness slide guitar leads the song, a country feel in keeping with the subject matter, and yet there is just enough to keep it rooted in an American hour tradition. Thanks once again to Timmy Capello on sax. As the song reaches its end, Gabriel's vocals take on an almost John Lennon quality. I find that overriding feeling immediately after listening to the album is that it is a cold, raw collection of songs. But along with Flotsam and Jetsam, Mother of Violence, Home Sweet Home and the ambient experimental exposure, there is enough here to endear it, but as a whole, the work has something of a disconnect. This is a transition album, the artists growing in confidence with every track laid down. Robert Fripp said, "Conventional wisdom is that it takes an artist 3 albums to find their identity. It took Peter 3 albums to get to the point." If that is the case, let's move on to the fine part of that journey, which finds Gabriel obsessed with new technologies such as samplers and learning just what is possible.
Critical reception. In New Musical, Nick Kent wrote that the album's brazenly left-field veneer left me cold at first, and it's only now that its strengths are starting to come across. Once past the disarming non-focus veneer, there's a quietly remarkable talent at work. Quiet in the manner of the slow fuse burn of Mother of Violence, with Roy Bittan's piano work outstripping anything he's turned out for either Bruce Springsteen or David Bowie. Closer to the root of the album, there's a purity, a strength to the songs individual enough to mark Gabriel out as a man whose creative zenith is close at hand.
Listeners were as divided as the album itself. Few Gabriel fans would call this their favorite album. It is perhaps not quite wrong to say that Gabriel overcomes his inner division only after this album and turns the solution into perfect pop music on 3, 4, and so. The album at hand may not be a perfect Gabriel-style album, but its experimental and conceptual character brings it closer to Genesis and particularly The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway than any other of his albums. Artists and fans have made their peace with the second album, at least on the warm-up summer tour 2007 when Gabriel played a number of songs from the album to enthusiastic appreciation.
Mouth all dry, eyes bloodshot, data stored in microdot. I kick in the cloud with my magazine shoes.